Hi guys, Kobe here for Science Sapien, and today we're talking about biochemistry. This is the second half of the presentation on biochemistry, so if you missed the first half or want to review that, go to youtube.com/thesciencesapiens and you can view the video there. Okay, water. Water is central to life on Earth. Every living organism needs water is based on water, so it's really important to understand how water works, how it does what it does. Okay, so why water? Why is water so special? There's six main reasons, and we'll go through one by one. So high specific heat. What that means is it's hard to change its temperature. If you live near the ocean, you know even at the end of summer, it's still cold. The water is still cold. It takes a long time to heat up. It's not like the air, which can go from 80 one day to 40 the next if you live in New England. Um, the water is pretty tough to change the heat of. So that allows organisms that live in cold environments. Earth's been frozen over several times. So because of that, high specific heat allows organisms to survive in water pretty well because it's a pretty constant environment. Second of all, it's hard to evaporate, so it cools your body, right? You sweat, that sweat will evaporate, and that will pull energy out of your body and cool you down. So that's another really important aspect to water. Okay, water is sticky. What does that mean? It's adhesive, so it sticks to other things really well. And this is really crucial to plants. And you might be wondering, well, water isn't sticky. I can put my hands in it and it doesn't feel sticky. But if you, for example, pour water into a glass and then pour the water out of the glass, you'll see beads of water on the outside of the glass or the inside of the glass stuck to the wall. That's water sticking to the glass. That means water is sticky. And this is really important for plants. A 100-foot tall tree doesn't have an organ like a heart to pump water up, and uses cohesion, which we'll talk about in a second, and adhesion to pull the water up its stem, its trunk. And water is also cohesive, meaning it sticks to itself really well, and this is also important because of plants being allowing them to pull water up. And this is a really good way of viewing this is to pour water in a glass, fill it up almost all the way to the top. And you'll see that, so here's my glass, this red thing, right? It's really bad, sorry. And then water. So if you fill water all the way to the top and then a little more, you'll see that it kind of makes this mushroom shape on top and sticks over the edge a little bit. If you're really careful, you can get water to sit just like that. And what that shows is it shows that water likes to stick to itself and it can actually hold itself up, which is a really important property. All right. It's also a universal solvent. So anything polar or ionic, right, a molecule that's ionically bonded, will dissolve in the water, which is important for things like blood, for cells that dissolve food and nutrients inside is really important for that. And finally, ice floats, which is really, really weird. If you put a solid of any other molecule in a liquid, it'll most likely sink. And ice floats, and that's important because what it does is it insulates the lower levels of water. So if you think of a lake somewhere cold, the air can get really, really cold, but water can only get to 32 degrees before it freezes. So even if it's negative 100 outside, the top layer of that lake will freeze, but below that top layer of ice, the water is only exposed to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And because of that, water below lakes usually stays unfrozen even if it's really cold outside because it has that insulating layer of ice. So that's really important. It allows organisms and fish on early Earth when it was really cold to survive even though it's freezing outside. Okay? So why water? It's got these 6 great reasons. It's really, really helpful because of that. Okay. And water is also related to something called the pH scale. So basically how acidic or how basic a solution is, a liquid solution is. So acid basically has a lot of H plus, hydrogen plus, which is basically just free protons. Okay, and bases have a lot of OH minus. And if you think about what H plus is, it's a proton, right? H plus and OH minus, which is an H and bonded to an O, but it's got a negative charge. If I put H plus HO, what do I get? I get H2O, or water. So acids basically just have more H's than OH or OH minuses, right? And bases have more OH than H plus. It's basically water broken down. So what part of water do you have more of? And the pH scale, it goes up by concentrations of 10. So if we look here, 7 is pure water. Anything lower than 7 is more acidic, right? Going that way is acidic. And going this way, right, getting a larger number is more basic. But going from 7 to 6 isn't a factor of 1. It's a factor of 10. So something that's pH 6 is 10 times more acidic than pH 7. And pH 5 is 10 times more acidic than pH 6 or 100 times more acidic than pH 7. So something that's pH 0 or pH 14 is really, really, really concentrated, okay? Something like battery acid or would be a really strong acid, or liquid drain cleaner. That's a really strong base. And these are, as you see, this right here, these numbers are the concentration of H+. So in OH minus, there's a ton of H+, way more than what we see. If pH 1 is 1 H+, pH 0 is 10 million. And pH 14 is 1 in 10 million. So it's really small H+ and a lot of OH minuses. Okay. So cells are around 7, like life is around 7, which is basically water. Blood is like 7.4, so it's pretty neutral. And buffers are this important molecule in biology and chemistry that resist change in pH. So it allows organisms to keep a very constant pH in their body. And we have this in our blood. It makes sure our pH stays around 7.4, so if we, eat something that's maybe acidic or digest something that's acidic, it doesn't kill us. It just, the buffers come into action and our pH stays pretty neutral. All right, so we've been talking about a lot of chemistry. How does this all apply to biology? So basically all of biology consists of 4 main macromolecules. Macro meaning many, molecules meaning molecule. So a macromolecule or a polymer is made out of many monomers or single pieces. It's biology is basically like playing with Legos, right? We have lots of little Lego pieces, and we add them together to make bigger and more complex things. So a human has, a lot of Lego pieces made into this complex organism, whereas something like a tree is also really complex. It has a lot of Lego pieces, but something like a basic bacteria, E. coli, it has a few Lego pieces, and it's not quite as complex. But we have the same Lego pieces for all of life, the same macromolecules. And there are amino acids, nucleotides, or nucleic acids, sugars, and lipids. Okay, so proteins, which we'll talk about first, are made out of the monomer amino acid, and they make the polypeptide of protein. Okay, and proteins do all of the work in a cell. They digest food, they build new structures, they defend you. Okay, proteins do all the work in the cell. Your muscles are protein, your brain has proteins, everything has proteins, all life has proteins, and they do all the work in the cell. Okay, monomers, amino acids, we put lots of amino acids, we have 20 of them, and we can basically spell out different words. And depending on how we spell a protein, it'll make a different shape, and as we know in biology, structure relates to function, so a different shape, a different structure will have a different function. So proteins that, make new molecules have a very specific shape, and proteins that digest molecules have a very specific shape, but it's different, okay? And then we have nucleic acids, which are made out of the monomer nucleotides, okay? And nucleotides have these 3 main parts. We have a sugar right here. If it's DNA, the sugar is deoxyribose. If it's RNA, the sugar is just ribose. Right here, we see that right there is the base, right? We have 4 main bases, A, D, T, and G, and if it's RNA, we also have U, right? And these basically can spell out words, and these are our genetic code. And the third part of a nucleotide, right, the monomer of a nucleic acid is this phosphate group right here. And we can add lots of these nucleotides together and then bind them together in this double helix structure, right? This double helix is DNA. And this is the instructions, the code to all of life. It tells organisms how to build proteins, when to build proteins. It tells them how to make food, how to digest food. It controls everything about the organism, reproduction, all that kind of stuff. by the DNA. The DNA is like the instruction book, the how to build the Lego structure. Okay. And then finally, the last two we have sugars, which are made out of monosaccharides, or saccharides, a fancy word for sugar. Mono meaning one sugar. So a polysaccharide is a sugar with many parts, and sugars have functions to store energy. You might hear that sugar's not good in your diet. Well, you need sugar in your diet. It's the main source of energy. But sugar also is structure. Trees are 100 feet tall because of sugar structures that they have. Okay, so sugars are really important for storing energy and for structure. And then finally, we have lipids. Lipids are fats, oils, and steroids. And they're a little more complex. They have monomers like fatty acids that we see here. But they also sometimes have glycerol, which will bind several fatty acids together. And fats, again, store energy. Fat isn't bad for you. Too much is, but fat isn't bad for you. You need it to store energy. It insulates organisms. So a polar bear has a layer of blubber to keep them warm. Fat is really good at that. And fat, so it keeps you warm. It provides energy. It can also be structural. It has a lot of really important functions. So just because, a food says it has high sugar and high fat doesn't mean it's bad for you. You need sugar and you need fat, just not too much of it. Okay, so these 4 macromolecules, these 4 molecules made out of smaller molecules, are basically like the Lego blocks of life. They build everything up. All biology is based on these 4 classes of molecules. Really important to understand this concept. All right. So enzymes are proteins that speed up chemical reactions, okay? And we have this fancy chart here. What does this show? So basically what this is showing is that, let's think of the example of lighting a fire. If I were to take 2 rocks and bang them together until I got a fire, it would take a long time. It would use a lot of my energy. I'd be really tired by the time I actually got a fire. But if I had a matchbox, lighting that campfire is going to be really easy. All I have to do is strike a match on the matchbox. An enzyme is like the matchbox, the chemical reaction being fire. But chemical reactions, are all sorts of things in biology. So what an enzyme does, what a protein does, is it reduces the energy needed to start a reaction. So it reduces the energy needed to start a fire. So it takes a lot less of my energy to light a fire with a match than it does to light a fire with 2 rocks. So that's the difference right here. That kind of height, this red right here, that is the energy, or the amount of energy at certain times without an enzyme, and this blue right here is the amount of energy with an enzyme. And what we see is at this top right here, it requires less energy to start with an enzyme. And because of that, we can gain more energy, right? This is what we're putting in. This is what we're taking out. And if we, subtract those numbers, we'll see the blue line gets more energy from the end. So when you eat something, you basically break it down. An enzyme breaks it down. Now, less energy it can put into breaking that food down, the more energy you can get from it. And that's really important to biology. You want to be able to maximize your energy intake, okay? So enzymes fit on this induction fit model. So basically what you do, it's kind of like a lock and key, but not quite. So the key goes into the lock, but then the lock molds around the key. So when a substrate, something that the enzyme is going to break down or combine with something, enters the enzyme changes shape so that it can do whatever it's going to do to the substrate. Okay? And enzymes work with cofactors and coenzymes. So cofactors are mostly minerals, coenzymes are vitamins, and they assist with the function of these enzymes with these proteins. So you need to eat, vitamins and minerals because they help these proteins do their job. And then finally, prions are infectious proteins that cause normal proteins to fold improperly and become more prions. So mad cow disease is an example of this. Scientists don't really understand what prions are or how they work, but they're these weird infectious proteins that will basically bind to other proteins, turn them into prions. And when you don't have any of these proteins, it's really dangerous because you can't do normal things, and these proteins will basically take over. But really rare, pretty new to science. We don't really understand what they are yet. This was part 2 of 2 for the biochemistry video. So if you missed part 1, head over to youtube.com/thesciencesapiens to check out part 1.
And feel free to rate and subscribe and comment if you have any questions. Thanks.